Alright. Calm down. Relax. Deep breaths now. One Piece is of course filled with great arcs, but the point of this video is to say at least one bad thing about every single arc in One Piece. So that means that almost every point I'm going to bring up is going to be negative, but that does not mean that the arcs are bad. It just means these are negative points about them. Just to add some context to everything going on, I'm going to be doing most of the arcs and skip only a couple of like the mini arcs and wrap-ups. And for a little bit more context, I experienced everything for the first time through the anime until episode 1000, and then I switched over to the manga. So I'm sure you're gonna disagree with some parts of the story, disagree with a lot of the things I say, but without further ado, let's get right into it. Romance Dawn. Buggy and Alvina were not really too interesting, and it was pretty slow without any real care for any of the characters at that point, and it was a pretty lackluster hook, and the three villains to that point were pretty much more annoying than they were anything else, and it didn't really give us too much context on the series. Syrup Village. Edward Scissorhands and Houdini were probably the worst two characters in One Piece in this entirety, villain or not, and those three kids kind of seem like a worse version of the Konohamaru tribe from Naruto. Seeing those two bozos scheme up like a pretty horrible plan to take over the village, whilst the story not really having a clear hook to that point still, was not really a great look. Karate, Don Krieg, and that guy with the ball were pretty lame, and their whole dynamic was just awkward and not really too One Piece. To be honest, Jim was pretty mopey, and once again, Don Krieg was not an exceptional village, but obviously Barati is absolutely goated. Arlong Park. Man, there really is not too much wrong with this one, but I'm gonna have to BS this one and say, because most of the arcs follow this exact same formula looking forward, so looking back on it, it's just due to how many times we've seen the Save the Island arc that it doesn't really hit the same. But hey guys, give me a break, man. You know, Arlong Park is pretty goated. Logtown, I would say this is likely because there's no proper fight, and Buggy kind of felt somewhat forced into the arc, and then Dragon's insane entrance though was sick, and it also only being 5 chapters, 5 episodes, made it feel like something that could have been longer and had a lot more volume and density to it. But considering the importance, considering how much time we spent doing other things, it's pretty frustrating when you're not getting the really cool stuff that you've been looking forward to. Little Garden was pretty lame because Mr. 3 was probably one of the other most uninteresting villains in One Piece, and also no one actually thought they were gonna die when they were in the candle, and the split up in this arc was also super annoying. Obviously, some goated moments. Drum Island, Wapple once again didn't pose much of a threat. I feel like the actual design of the island could have been a lot cooler, and there was a lot more creative ways to go about like the whole island design. Wapple once again kind of enforced that trend that it seemed like a lot of the villains in One Piece were going to be weaker and not as cool and more comedic. So at this point, the whole gag with Wapple and Buggy was getting a little bit more annoying. Like I was saying, the island could have been a little bit cooler. Alabasta is probably the single arc that suffered the most from the time period at which it came out. Luffy beating Crocodile and Crocodile using Haki makes absolutely no sense whatsoever looking back. And it isn't completely a detriment, but it makes it hard to look back on it and not think about that. But if I was to pick something else though, it would definitely be the fake out death of Pell as one of the single worst moments in all of One Piece. And it's something that is still annoying, and it returns and becomes a more annoying aspect of the show. He literally survived a nuke. Sky Island. Jesus Christ, do I even need to say? It was long, boring, uninteresting with a really weird vibe, and I do not care that Oda gave the arc more importance 800 episodes later. It does not matter to me. It was beyond boring. Long Ring, I mean, like, why is this even an arc? Like, they wasted the Davy back concept too. It could have been so cool to actually see a real Davy back fight, but of course they wasted it. Water 7 is as close to a perfect arc I think you're gonna get in One Piece, but if I had to just draw something to say is the worst part, I wish we could see more of the build up and the tension between Luffy and Usopp a little bit more, and the scenes damaging how it affected the crew and how it affected Usopp. I think we could have got a little more scenes of that, but really no complaints. I would still say it's 10 out of 10, and it's followed up by Enies Lobby, which is honestly another close to perfect arc. This is also not really a big deal, but I feel like Paulie, the vice president, I feel like he could have done a little bit more in Enies Lobby. He pretty much took the back burner. And another little piece is, I think there was a lot of father fights, I would call them, and that, in case you don't know, or this is how I'm defining it, when it's like Luffy or Zoro and they're just fighting hordes of like mindless marines that have no chance of beating them, to me it just drags it and it's just a little boring. But honestly, it's Enies Lobby, come on now. Thriller Bark, it's like Water 7 and Enies Lobby were perfect. Then you're gonna give us one of the worst arcs in One Piece. The characters getting split up, annoying. Moria, annoying. The Halloween vibe of the island felt more like Hotel Transylvania than anything eerie or scary. Absalom, beyond annoying. This arc was just painful to get through. It had no hook, it had no real meaning behind it, and I do not care that the end was cool. You cannot forget the other 85% of the arc. It was horrible. Sabaody, I feel like Rayleigh versus Kizaru could have been a little longer, and seeing more of the supernovas fight and giving us some backstory there on Law and Kid would have been a really good time to do it, because you're introducing these characters with higher and similar bounties to Luffy, so some explanation on them could have been nice to characterize them going forward into the story. Like, knowing more about Kid and Law might have made it hit a little bit harder in Wano when you see them defeat Big Mom. But much like some of the other arcs, Sabaody is one of my favorite arcs in the series, so there's nothing too significant there either. Amazon Lily was a really strange arc, because it was the first time we really saw Luffy away from the crew for a whole arc, and it was missing elements of the cast that kept it interesting during the downtime on arcs, and the characters brought in to replace the Strawhats were not nearly as interesting as like some of the other side characters in other arcs and islands. So I think Amazon Lily kind of set a weird vibe to it, but I think Oda was just trying something new. Impel Down had this really odd feeling as if you were progressing down the levels, whilst even though the levels were interesting and everything had something special about it, it also felt like it dragged the story down, because you knew how much further you had to go till you got to the bottom, and you were just kind of watching it like, oh, are we gonna get there, are we gonna get there? And even though it was interesting, just knowing how much further you had to go when they showed the map of like where he was in perspectives to the bottom floor, I don't know if this is just me and if this is like a really weird and off-putting complaint, but it really made me hard to invest in what was going on because I knew how much further there was to go. Now, Marineford has got to be the fact that Ace is a complete idiot, and he died because Akainu made fun of him. In what is one of the most emotional panels and scenes in One Piece, Ace decides to just be an absolute dumbass and try and fight Akainu down for what? The scene is also hurt because like this weird hockey thing at this point, looking back on it, it still is like we're introduced to hockey like 100 chapters later or something, and then Ace just eats the shot. It didn't really make too much sense. So the whole hockey thing, like you guess you can give them a break, but the big part is just Ace turning to Akainu because he was mocking him was not great, and that leading up to his death. Like, I don't really care about the symbolism of him and being a hothead with his fruit. Obviously the after in the moment was sick, and it's still crazy that Ace died, but it was just like, come on, man, for what? Fishman Island, Horty was just so underwhelming beyond belief, and all the characters and the new abilities, they didn't even get enough time to shine. Like, it felt like the Straw Hats weren't even really flexing like Oda had intended the arc to be, and it seemed like he didn't really know how he wanted to portray the new altered version of the characters. There's definitely good lore building moments and setting up future fights with Big Mom. It was just kind of a strange arc too, where it lacked that tension, and Horty did not land in any capacity. Now, Punk Hazard is actually by far my least favorite arc in One Piece, and I probably got to Punk Hazard within 4 to 5 months of starting One Piece, and that arc alone took me 4 months to bring myself to watch, and I'm really surprised I got through it. I did not care about the kids, I did not care about the switching bodies, I did not care about them getting split up. Monette was not interesting enough to make up for all the other stuff. Smoker being lame was not something good to come back to, because he seemed like he was gonna be Luffy's true rival in the Marines, and it was just so much stuff going on that it was almost like typical One Piece. You know how it's gonna get wrapped up, and I did not care. And typically knowing that how it's gonna get wrapped up is fine in One Piece, that's typically just how it is, but I just did not care. Dressrosa, you cannot say Dressrosa without talking about the pacing. Obviously reaching points as low as 0.5 chapters an episode is insane, but everyone says pacing. Mine will have to be the fact that Law was not the one to defeat Dofi. I feel like this arc was hurt the most by Luffy needing to be the one to take down the villain. There was so much backstory between Law, Corazon, and Dofi that it just made sense for Law to finally step up and take him down, and he didn't even contribute as much to that fight as I would have liked. And it was just like, why does Luffy need to take him down in this instance? Like, with all the story reasons, it would have been way better for Law to do that. But with that being said, Gear 4 is obviously sick. Zou, them climbing up the elephant was not the most interesting part. The midsection with the Zou village kind of dragged. Momo was not really the most interesting character at this point. I think there was a lot of bringing Momo down so those moments in Wano would hit harder, but nothing really too major bad with this arc. Nothing to really complain about in this department. Whole Cake Island was a weird one because there was no proper conclusion to this arc. They didn't defeat Big Mom, and Luffy didn't really beat Katakuri. He gave up, and in the anime the fight was like 30 episodes, which completely ruined that fight for me. And to be honest, because of that experience, I definitely like Katakuri way less than like other people like Katakuri. By not having him defeat him straight up, it was pretty unsatisfying, and no one really expected him to do anything to Big Mom, but you kind of expected him to properly beat Katakuri, but you weren't feeling like that much further ahead than you were at the beginning of the arc, because Sanji is back, so you're kind of back to a starting point, but it's still not like Luffy seems that much further ahead. Obviously though, Snake Man was cool, Jinbei joining, broken the poneglyph was sick, but it was just a really weird second half of the arc. Wano, Jesus Christ. It has to be the fact that it took him 5 tries to beat Kaido, the no Zoro flashback, Samurai suck, a bolstering amount of unanswered plot points, Carrot and Yamato not joining the crew, the Kaido flashback was so bad, I literally forgot it until I was writing the script. A lot of the Topiropo fights in the manga were underwhelming. I think in the anime they were definitely a lot better, and the 9 Akaza all had lackluster backstories that were underwhelming, and it really didn't make much sense why they were hyped up to really have a chance against Kaido. The Jack nerf was pretty wild, and depending on your position, the Big Mom nerf too was pretty bad. I don't feel like she was nerfed that bad, but I know a lot of people do. Obviously Wano was insanely hyped and had great moments like Gear 5, Zoro vs King, Sanji vs Queen, Big Mom vs Kid-in-Law. Obviously Wano had so many hype moments. I think it should get some shine because Act 1 definitely felt different than a lot of the first parts of a One Piece arc, and I think it should get some credit for that. I really liked Act 1, but there was just like Big Mom amnesia, and you're not gonna give me the Zoro flashback? Like what? Kaido's flashback is gonna be like a chapter? What? Like obviously great moments, but story-wise fell on its face. For me anyways. Egghead, the Seraphim seem like they are going to be one of the most annoying additions to the story, and I know they seem really cool. They remind me of the Edo Tensei from Naruto, and it seems like they're just going to be there to delay the story and force character separation and force these awkward 1v1s. I know they seem cool, but I just have a feeling they're just going to become really annoying after a while. And also, I didn't really care too much about the who killed who with the Vegapunks, but that might also just be me. So that was a mouthful to get through. These are my takes. Obviously, I think there's some interesting points I want to talk about is the fact that as I was making this, early One Piece had a lot more comedic villains, and to me they were really annoying at the time. I don't know if you guys will agree with that, but I noticed myself every time there was an early One Piece arc, I was like, oh, the biggest problem here was the villain, like easily the villain, because all the vibe and stuff were really cool. Definitely for some of those pre-time skip arcs, I was really struggling to find at least one thing to talk about. Post-time skip came out with like the hype and energy, of course, but the story beats were missing a lot of the time, and hopefully I didn't want to come off as hating too much, but I also wanted to just be honest with my opinions. Like, I honestly hate Thriller Bark and Punk Hazard, and I don't know how people are gonna feel about that, but that's just how it is. Obviously Wano seemed like I killed it really bad, but it's honestly because it's the freshest in my mind. But I think it's more so there's so much stuff in that arc I wanted to get that I didn't end up getting, which was so disappointing. So these are my takes. Let me know what your takes are down below. Criticize my opinions if you want in the comments. Go crazy in the comments, and also comment some criticism. I really need it. Drop a like if you enjoyed the video. Don't forget, we're just getting started. We're gonna stay consistent, and I'll see you in the next video.